maybe one of the law enforcement officers can tell me. Uh, I I can't believe this is what the house looked like before all the shooting started. But this is not the result of ARs being fired into the house or out through the house. Does this mean they drove a Bearcat up and smashed in the front of the house? I mean, that would kind of make sense, but there's really no indication of that having happened in anything I've seen. But I mean, people could not possibly have been living in this house in this condition, I would think. Continuing, the man then left the house while armed. Police said an officer opened fire and shot him in the front yard, where he was pronounced dead. He was identified by police as Terry Clark Hughes Jr., 39. We do have a photo of Mr. Hughes to share with all of you. Jennings said the suspect used an AR-15 style rifle and a .40 caliber handgun and had additional ammo for both guns. Police were looking into how he acquired the guns because he was a convicted felon. How had he acquired the guns? I wonder. Anybody wonder how a convicted felon? I mean, surely he didn't pass a background check, right? We have laws against convicted felons being in possession of guns. I don't know why he didn't obey the law. When the standoff was over, a female and a 17-year-old were found inside the house and were brought to a police station as persons of interest. Now, I presume the female is adult. Anybody want to bet that she's the one who bought the guns for her man? That she passed the background check because she's not a felon? Because that is one of the most common ways that felons manage to get their hands on guns. They steal them, they buy them out of the trunks of cars, or they get their girlfriends to buy them on their behalf. Straw man purchases. I can tell you that when I worked as a diesel mechanic in Harlem, New York City, and then as now, it was impossible to get a concealed carry permit if you were a normal person. Just about every week, we'd have a car pull into our yard, pop the trunk, and have all kinds of stuff for sale. Car stereos, speakers for your car, and guns. Always guns. No background check, no excise tax, no paperwork to fill out. Now, of course, I never took advantage of that opportunity. I'm a law-abiding citizen, but it was presented, and there were mechanics in our shop who did take advantage. So, a female and a 17-year-old were found inside the house and were brought to a police station as persons of interest. A later statement said both individuals were female and that they had exited the home following negotiations with a SWAT team. Investigators were trying to determine what happened inside the residence. Police initially believed there were two shooters involved in the incident, including the individual killed in the initial shooting, but the chief said Tuesday he's not ready to say there was a second shooter. The two persons of interest are fully cooperating with the investigation and haven't been charged. The suspect was shooting at the officers from the upstairs of the house. The chief said even though our officers were trying to take cover, they were at a disadvantage because the suspect was up at a higher level and they were trying to return fire from a lower position to an elevated position. The suspect may also have fired at the officers after he was shot outside the house. 8 officers in total were shot. And I have the names of all the officers in a separate article, so I'll go over them there. The officers died as heroes. And more talk about the officers. But I have details elsewhere I can share with all of you, including their names and photos. President Biden spoke. Merrick Garland spoke. Of course, for them, this will be just another reason to disarm law-abiding people. And a neighbor. Okay, I have a second article here as well. This is about the suspect on whom the warrant was being served. A law-abiding, upstanding member of the community, do you imagine? Did his background checks, filled out his paperwork, followed whatever the local gun laws are in North Carolina, I don't know, safe storage, whatever they may have on the books, magazine capacity limits. I've never lived in North Carolina. I never had to worry about it. But I'm sure this guy never even had so much as a speeding ticket in his life, right? As clean a background as Kyle Rittenhouse. Or maybe not. Man who fatally shot 4 officers had extensive criminal history, police chief says. The man who fatally shot 4 law enforcement officers and wounded 4 others in East Charlotte on Monday had been convicted of crimes across the state. Kerry Clark Hughes Jr., 39 years old, spent time in prison in 2011 and 2013. In all, Hughes faced 49 criminal charges since 2001. In Mecklenburg County, he was charged with misdemeanors and felonies in recent years, including felony manufacturing marijuana and possession of marijuana with intent to sell in 2021. The latter charge was dismissed earlier this month, according to court records. For a guy who's had 49 criminal charges since 2001, why would you ever dismiss a charge against that guy? I don't care what it is. Still, at a news conference Tuesday, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Chief Johnny Jennings said Hughes may not have been known to officers as particularly dangerous when they went to serve him warrants. Well, they may not have known him personally, but they knew the warrants they were serving. It was 2 warrants. One is for felon in possession of firearms, and the other was for felony fleeing to elude. So he'd outrun a police pursuit, an automobile police pursuit prior. That's a dangerous dude. He's got guns and he doesn't follow orders. And he'll engage in high-speed flight in an automobile. You know that's a dangerous dude. That's why the cops showed up with the chest rigs and the body armor and the long guns, and so many of them. I think there were 12 in the initial team, 8 of whom got shot, 4 killed. Hughes fired at least 100 rounds from a high-powered rifle. This would be the AR. I mean, obviously not really a high-powered rifle if you know anything about rifles, but nevertheless. At officers who were outside the home he was in. Hughes was in an upstairs room during the standoff. In response to a question about whether the officers were familiar with Hughes, the chief said, "Not that I'm aware of." Each CMPD division has individuals that they obviously encounter quite a bit and that they know of personally. I do know he had an extensive criminal history. I do not know the familiarity the division officers had with him, how long he lived at that address, so I don't have that answer for you today. If they didn't know him personally, they knew what kind of dude they were going to be dealing with, right? In a press release Monday, the police said Hughes was wanted for possession of a firearm by a felon and 2 counts of felony fleeing to elude out of Lincoln County. That'll be one of the reasons the marshals were involved. Hughes also had a warrant for his arrest from charges in Person County near the Virginia border. According to court records, he pleaded guilty to felony breaking and entering in 2010 and served about 5 months in prison. And then we let him out again. In 2021, he was charged with possession of a firearm by a felon. He never showed up to court during his scheduled hearing last year. Last year was 2023. It took him from 2021, when he was caught with the gun, a felon in possession, until his court date. That seems weird. And then it wasn't an arrest warrant issued by the prosecutor. I mean, this would have been a bench warrant issued by a judge just because he didn't show up in the courtroom when he was supposed to. Hughes also had 2 orders for his arrest for missed court appearances in Mecklenburg County. One followed his failure to appear on a charge of fleeing to elude arrest, and the other stemmed from his failure to appear for possession of marijuana. Hughes had a slew of other charges dismissed. Charges that were dismissed in Mecklenburg County include manufacturing marijuana, possession of drug paraphernalia, driving with a license revoked. I wonder why that happened. All from 2021. Asked at the news conference if Hughes should have been freed out in society with normal law-abiding people, the chief said he could cite hundreds of examples of people who should not be out preying on our citizens. And I've been pretty vocal about that, particularly with juveniles. Well, this guy's 39 and still a bad dude. He didn't calm down. I will say the system is not completely where it needs to be. No kidding, Chief. It's obviously fundamentally broken. But we have so many people involved. We're overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed in the court system. I don't have an answer. You know what's a good answer? If you take this guy with his first felony and you keep him locked up for 10 or 15 years, then he's not cycling through the system 49 times, is he, Chief? The very problem is that you kick him loose. And then, of course, he comes back, like through a revolving door, dozens of times. If you want crime to go down, folks, you got to lock bad people up and keep them there. And I know, then the pendulum swings and everybody whines about over incarceration and institutional racism and school to prison culture. The alternative is you have dudes like this on the street. Choose your opponent. The chief says, but I can tell you that I am focused on holding people accountable for the crimes they commit, whether that means incarceration, probation, or a fine. But of course, the sheriff doesn't make those decisions. I mean, he can place people under arrest, but then they get handed over to the court system and the prosecutor and the judges and, of course, public defenders. And they make the decisions about how serious a charge a person will be tried on, whether they'll be sentenced to incarceration or probation or even just fined, or just have the charges dismissed. That's not up to the chief. There's a lot of people to be held to blame for the level of crime in our society today. And then, of course, they want to disarm us, the law-abiding majority of the population, because we'll obey those gun laws, I presume. Not like Mr. Hughes. Okay, so that's about it there. And this is this is Mr. Hughes. This is the 4 officers who were killed. 3 of the officers killed were members of the U.S. Marshal Fugitive Task Force, Sam Pollock. Sorry if I mispronounced that. To Mr. Pollock's family. And Alden Elliott of the North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections, and Thomas Weeks, a deputy U.S. Marshal. A 4th victim, Joshua Iyer, was an officer with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. You think these folks made a positive contribution to their community? You think they had 49 felony charges, felony, misdemeanor, some combination against them over a 15, 20-year period? Since his whole life, basically. I mean, 49 charges since like 2001, right? So that's 22 years ago. He's 39. Hughes was 39 when he was finally killed in this gunfight. So his whole adult life, he's been nothing but a criminal, often a felony criminal. And of course, we can speculate that his criminal behavior began much, much younger. But of course, we wouldn't have access to those juvenile criminal records.